Hello, wealth hackers, and welcome to the Truth About Real Estate Investing podcast. I think that's the name of the show. It feels like it's been a while since I've done this. This is a real estate podcast, so I guess I should talk about my own real estate once in a while. Cherry and I purchased the biggest real estate deal we've ever done, a commercial office condo in Oakville, Ontario, and that will be home to our accounting business, real estate business, iWIN membership, Stock Hacker Academy. It'll be a place where we will meet clients, host meetings, teach, network, and coach current and future wealth hackers. We're playing with names. We're going to give this place a different name. We're playing with the name iWIN Hub currently. It'll be a coming together, a one-stop shop of awesomeness in all the most effective ways to invest. If you're not familiar with commercial investing, commercial office space is a completely different investment than most of what we've talked about on this show. We got a great deal on our space. It's per square foot. It is significantly better than any other condo, any sort of residential condo there is. It's over 4,000 square feet. And as we always like to duplex most of our investments, we already have doctor tenants who currently half out almost half the space to help cover part of our mortgage. As this is the biggest investment we've ever made, it's also the largest and most expensive long-term mortgage we've taken on. Like all investments, we are excited, overwhelmed, and scared. Yes, we're scared. Yes, we get scared too. It's not like our regular residential real estate where we renovate to suite basements or make ready for university students, where the rents cover all of our costs and provide us cash flow. In this case, our business will have to generate additional income to cover the majority of the mortgage payments plus all the operating costs of a commercial space. You know, we still have to pay for heat, hydro, insurance, all those sorts of fun things. In the case of our, plan B is if we fail, these commercial space, so to give an example, I think our property was on the market for over 6 months. It took over 6 months for someone like ourselves to come along and buy it. And half of it was vacant during that time. I guess these folks said we're okay with negative cash flow. Anyways, so if we were to rent out the space, which would likely take a few months, like much longer than it is to find a residential tenant, because again, it's even the space that we had to rent out is over 2,000 square feet. Not everyone's looking for that. Anyways, the combined rent, if we were to rent out the space based on market rent and the current rent, it would not come close to covering the mortgage. Again, that would not come close to covering the mortgage. Plus, we'd likely have to redo our already expensive mortgage for a more expensive mortgage as the owner are not occupying the space. Of course, we are intending to occupy the space. I'm just trying to give you the worst case scenario. I run through worst case scenarios all the time. Like any and all investments we've done, such as the Wealth Hacker Conference in 2019, the ugly house that we bought with all knob and tube, bad electrical, a leaking basement, that I didn't have inspected and I bought firm without Jerry knowing. And the next Wealth Hacker Conference this coming November 2020. We move forward in fear. Our vision of helping 10,000 Canadians become millionaires by investing in real estate or stock hacking is bigger than our fear. My goal of leaving $10 million to the Hamilton Bash Brigade when we leave this planet is bigger than my fear. So we push forward through fear. That same $10 million that we leave to our registered charity will be invested via stock hacking to provide a 10% yield of cash flow to provide the poor children in Hamilton warm clothing, food, and toys each and every holiday. A 10% return is on $10 million is $1 million. So that buys a lot of toys, clothing, food. So what if I am afraid? The outcome is bigger than our fear, and no one ever 10x's without having risk. The great thing is I know we're not alone. I have an unbelievable partner, my wife Cherry, my team at iWIN Real Estate, our internal marketing team, our event planner Shauna Arnott, Cherry's team at our accounting practice, and we have our extensive list of clients, students of Stock Hacker Academy, attendees of the Wealth Hacker Conference who hopefully will tell a family member or friend about this podcast if they are interested in taking control of their financial future. Or if they're beyond the interest stage and want to learn more, we are currently offering free training classes on the number one investment strategy. The same strategy that's been discussed a million times on this podcast. We're going to discuss it today again with our guest, and we've practiced it dozens and dozens of times by our clients, my team, myself personally. We've likely done more of this strategy, which is based on apartments in the Hamilton St. Catharines region, than any other group there is out there. These classes are newer, so they will be free for now while we work at the bugs, but we will be charging soon, so please don't delay. We sold each and every class out in less than 48 hours. The first 2 were 1 hour and 3 hours, respectively. All of February classes are already sold out, so please don't delay. Go to investortraining.ca/free class. Again, that's investortraining.ca/free class. On to this week's show. This week's guest is a client, a real estate investor, a stock hacker, iWIN member, Karen Cumming. Karen Cumming. You may remember Karen from the decades she spent as a television reporter on CHTV, a station based in Hamilton that also serves the Niagara and the GTA. Years before that, she worked as a radio newscaster and talk show producer everywhere from Hamilton to Toronto to Montreal with CHUM Radio and Corus. There's a good chance you may have heard her name thanks to something that she has had to do through in media, though, and everything to do with that space. A project, in fact, she's literally out of this world. This is where the podcast kind of goes different. Karen is one of those people that is known as the Mars 100. 100 people from around the world who made it to the final round of astronaut selection in a legitimate mission to colonize the red planet with a company out of the Netherlands known as Mars One. She's trying to get to Mars. Long before her space adventures, Karen became involved in real estate investing back in 2008. You remember the year that the markets tanked. The year the experts would have said no one should be putting their money into property. Despite all that, she bought a single-family home in the Old South neighborhood of London, Ontario. Soon she joined the Real Estate Investment Network in order to learn what she needed to know about becoming a successful landlord. About 12 years later, she now owns a freehold townhouse on Hamilton Mountain and a single-family home in the lower city of Hamilton, and is one of the original members of iWIN. Today, Karen is a freelance journalist, health promoter, and teacher who writes about mindful living, meditation, and self-care at KarenCumming.com. That's Karen, CUMMING.com. Here's where things get really interesting. Karen has an extra special reason for investing in real estate now, thanks to her life experience she went through recently. She has seen the inside of Ontario's long-term care system up close and personal, and understands more clearly than ever the need to be financially proactive and prepared for the final stage of life. Earlier this year, she and her sister Pat guided their mother Verna through that system and were stunned to realize how little they knew about how it works. They felt ill-informed, ill-equipped to make the decision that they had to make. And they knew they weren't alone. Thousands of baby boomers across Ontario are in the same boat. In the end, they decided to write a book designed to help other families on their own journey with an elderly parent. It's called The Indispensable Survival Guide to Ontario's Long-Term Care System. Again, that's The Indispensable Survival Guide to Ontario's Long-Term Care System, now available on Amazon.ca, chapters.indigo.ca, on Kindle and Kobo, and Smashwords. Welcome to the podcast, Karen. Karen, let me start off. I usually like to ask people what's keeping you busy these days.
Mm-hmm. What's keeping me busy these days is a book that I've written together with my sister, which I know we're going to talk more about later on. It's based on our mom's experience of the long-term care system, and it's a survival guide that's designed to help families navigate their way through the system.
And what was the inspiration for that book?
Well, we did not have a very easy time of navigating through the system. We found that there wasn't very much help for people, and we found ourselves very frustrated and overwhelmed, and feeling like there was no one we could turn to for advice or for guidance. And we realized that there was a real need for this information out in the world, and there was no question that somebody had to do it, so it might as well be us.
What's the name of the book?
It's called The Indispensable Survival Guide to Ontario's Long-Term Care System. Practical tips to help you and your family be proactive and prepared.
Who is it for?
It's primarily for the children of senior citizens, the baby boomers who are in my demographic. I'm 58 years old, people my age and older who are facing this life experience of having to guide their mother or father into the final days of their life.
Right. So before we continue, I don't want to overwhelm the listener. Like, what show are we listening to? You are a real estate investor. So let's take a quick segue into real estate, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So we don't lose the listener. So I do want to come back to the book because I think it's a really important message. And also I'd like to tie it back into real estate as well. So tell us about, you started investing in 2008. Actually,
That's
not a
right.
bad time to start.
It wasn't a bad time to start from our perspective now, but I was a first timer, and I don't think I really understood the volatility of what was happening in the world in 2008. I didn't even faze me that I was buying my first rental property then. And looking back now, I realize that a lot of people would have thought that was very risky, but at the time, it was my first time. I was really committed to making it happen. And what I do remember about that time was that my mortgage rate was 1.5%, and it stayed there for a while. So that was one of the perks for sure. It was a single family house in an area of London, Ontario called Old South. I bought in London because I knew somebody who lived there, and I used to go and visit them. And I really liked London. I thought it was a nice city, and the property values were much less there than they were in the GTA. And it was a way for me to get in at a lower price point, but still in a market that eventually, I mean, more than 10 years later, things are starting to move up. For the longest time, they were pretty stagnant, and I was a little worried. But now we can see that London is following the lead of a lot of cities in the GTA. And the property values are moving up, which is great. So that was my first experience, and that led me to joining RAIN, the Real Estate Investment Network. I was very eager to learn the things that I needed to know in order to become not just a landlord, but a successful landlord, an informed landlord. And that's where I met you. You, of course, were Mr. Hamilton at RAIN. And what I remember is that during the breaks of the meetings, the big lineup was always in front of you. Everybody wanted to talk to Erwin. He wore the Hamilton Tiger Cats jersey to make himself stand out in the crowd, which it did. And I do remember actually one night getting a chance to talk with you for a couple of minutes. And I asked you, if you were going to buy in Hamilton, where would you buy? And this is about 10 years ago. And I remember you telling me Wellington North. And anybody who comes from Hamilton knows very well that Wellington North is in the inner city. It's in a part of Hamilton that historically has not been considered to be, the kind of neighborhood where maybe you wanted to put your money. And I remember walking away from that conversation just shaking my head and thinking to myself, what's this guy all about, and does he really know what he's talking about? And of course, all these years later, we know that you knew exactly what you were talking about, and it was exactly the right place to put your money.
I don't know if I was ever right.
Oh, I think you were, and you're being modest. So that was my start, and I wound up eventually joining Rockstar, and then joining your group, which is now morphed into iWIN, and really enjoyed the meetings that you first started out with. I went on Saturday mornings, and I really found them to be of great value. You had wonderful speakers. You talked about issues that were really pertinent to everybody in the room, and I learned so much from you and from watching the way that you brought people together to help each other, which I think is wonderful.
I remember back then, way back then, Evelyn, for example, who's been on the show, and
Of course.
we actually I re-released one of her episodes just recently. Her first property was on Burlington Street.
Erwin, if you had told me that I should be buying a house on Burlington Street 10 years ago, I would have said you were crazy.
It wasn't 10 years ago. It was 2011. So
it wasn't even 10 years ago.
It was 9 years ago.
Isn't that wild? That is wild. You know what? I would have been afraid to buy a house on Burlington Street. Yeah. And I know that if I'd been working with you, I wouldn't have been afraid. But as somebody who was just starting out, I was new, and I got started later in my life. I'm not one of those folks who started when they were 30. It's something that I really did want to do for the longest time, but it took me time to get the money together that I needed to do it.
Right.
But really, I mean, if you had suggested Burlington Street to me, wow, I would have had to really think long and hard. But look what happened.
To give you context, I think she paid I don't think she might let us share. I think it's $170, and it's worth over $400 now.
Oh my gosh! Amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And to give the listener context, when you say Burlington Street to someone who understands Hamilton, especially if they're from Hamilton, Burlington Street is the street where Stelco, DeFasco are. that's what their street address is, also on Burlington Street. So it's a very famous street for and being like the heaviest industrial street in our city. So
Industrial heart of town.
yeah. So yeah, we people were questioning our choices, but
I can only imagine.
It wasn't lots of people question our choices, but again, it's sometimes the outsider of the city has the best eyes.
Yes,
because they'll see the opportunity. For example, most of the investment in the city has come from outside the city.
I understand why, because people who come from Hamilton, they would really question that.
Mm-hmm.
Investing in the industrial part of town, is that a good idea? And somebody from outside the city, of course, they would have a different pair of eyes looking at it.
Not just the pair of eyes, different pair of eyes when they're looking at Hamilton, but they have to deal with their own lack of affordability wherever they're coming from. Anyone in the GTA has affordability issues. So when they see the exact same house in Hamilton for 20%, 30%, 60% difference in price, that's a deal to them. So
exactly
right, and that's a piece of advice I think everyone needs to understand. You can't get stagnant on your view of the city or the current prices, because someone else from a more expensive place is going to come in and see this and like, this is cheap, this is on sale,
absolutely,
this is 30% off.
And even now, even today, right? You're still getting people from other cities coming to Hamilton and saying, "Wow, what a bargain!"
Oh yeah, even for people from out of the country, they're
sure.
So I want to go back to the London property. Why did you start investing in real estate? Why the decision to do something extra? You had a job.
Sure.
I'm guessing you had a pension as well.
No, I didn't. I worked in radio for the longest time. When I first got out of university, I studied what they called back then radio and television arts at Ryerson, and I really wanted to work in radio. I think most people who work in radio, it's in their blood to do it because you don't get paid a lot of money. It's something that you feel like it's a vocation. It's something that you want to do. In my case, I was interested in radio news, so I wanted to be the news reporter telling everybody what they needed to know about what was going on in the world that day. And so, back then when I first started working in radio, I think my first job, I made $18,000 a year, and that would have been in the late 1980s. And so, radio people, if you were interested in real estate, which honestly I really always was, at one point my father was a realtor in the in the 1980s, which of course, as you know, was probably not the best time in the world to be a realtor.
Yeah.
But I had an interest in it, partly because of that, but also there was just something inside me that felt compelled to do it in a way I can't explain. I didn't know anybody who was doing it. I had no friends who were doing it, but I knew that it was something that was possible, and it was something that could help me to build my own wealth. And I didn't even work with a realtor who worked with investors. I worked with a residential realtor, and I have to tell you this story. I think it's so funny. I remember when we went to look at the property, I said to her, what kind of rent do you think I could get in this neighborhood? And she called a friend of hers who was a hairdresser and who had a hair salon and asked them, what do you think we could get for rent in this neighborhood? And of course, the hairdresser really had no idea about residential real estate, but this is what we based our decision on, which, in retrospect is crazy. But she just didn't have a real feel for rental properties or investors, and it all turned out all right. But in retrospect, of course, I know I should have been working with someone who knew more about investor.
It's interesting because, for example, you saw Donato speak at one of my events.
Yes,
and it's almost beneficial to be ignorant getting into these things.
It's ignorance is bliss. Yeah. Because if you didn't have that, you would never take action. You would always be afraid.
Totally. Like that conference, if I knew what we were getting into, we never would have done it.
Yeah, what a great lesson.
And so no different than real estate. If you understand all the problems and all the things you didn't know yet, I don't think many people would get into it. So
I don't think so either. I agree.
Yeah. But the ignorance has rewarded someone like Donato Castioli. I don't think I've had him on the pod. I need to have him on the pod. But for give you folks context, Donato was buying acreage properties in the suburbs of Hamilton, specifically Ancaster, and he wasn't getting much cash flow, but he's buying lots of it. No program out there today would teach that strategy, but an acre can go for, I think an acre goes for at least $500,000, I think, in Ancaster these days. So, and he has lots of
And
them.
you know what's ironic about that? The area where he started buying property,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
grew up
yeah.
about 4 or 5 blocks away from that in
Mm-hmm,
Ancaster.
mm-hmm,
And that was a long time ago, but looking back, there were some very smart people who knew that there was potential there, and he was
mm-hmm.
one of them.
Yeah. So, which is some parts of one of the reasons what I don't like about this show is we give so much detail. And I don't want to overwhelm people, making them feel like I don't know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. I'm not going to take action.
Exactly.
Right. And because one of the things I don't like about the show is that we give like the full spectrum of real estate investing.
It is a lot. It's a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take
Sometimes.
in. And I don't want people to get into analysis paralysis because I believe that we're part of the problem in
I hear
providing
you.
people too much information. Do you remember what you bought the house for in
I
London?
do. It was $189,900.
And do you remember what
And
you
it
rented it
was
for after the
it's
hairstylist's advice?
funny story. The first person I rented it to was a student going to Fanshawe, and his dad was a lawyer out west who co-signed the lease.
Uh-huh.
And we rented it for, I think it was $1,300 a month in 2008, which was a lot back then. But now I kind of understand why they were so willing to spend that much. It turned out he was studying music, and I didn't have the smarts to ask him, what instrument do you play? And it turns out he played the drums, and he played them in the front window of the house every single day. And by the time he moved out a year later, none of the neighbors were talking to me. It was a big education. And this is funny too. The I posted the house on Kijiji to try and rent it, and I wasn't getting a lot of bites. And I got an email or a message on Kijiji from a woman in London who said that she was a property manager and she specialized in renting properties. So I was getting a bit nervous, and I decided to take her up on her offer to rent the property for me, which she did. And later on, it turned out that she was, according to the police in London, one of the biggest fraud artists in London, and tried to make off with my last month's rent. And in the end, I chased her down and I got it back. But wow, is that ever an education?
Oh boy. My first thought is just work with referrals.
Exactly. You know what? She was a referral. Crazy. I checked all her references. She checked out. Everyone, sang her praises. So I don't know what the story was, but it was a great lesson in just hanging in there.
Okay, that's wild.
It was wild.
Do you still own the house?
I do.
Do you know what do you think it's worth today? And what do you rent it for?
Sure, they appraised it last year at about, I think it was 350 is what they appraised it at, and right
Fabulous.
now it's renting at 1,200. I know that I could get more, but I have a wonderful tenant who's been there for a long time, and that's what the rent is at the moment.
Fantastic. And what have you done since with real estate?
I have bought a freehold townhouse on Hamilton Mountain,
Mm-hmm.
which has been a really great investment. It's pretty much doubled I bought it in 2012, and I would say it's almost doubled since then. And long-term tenants who are wonderful. And I've just last year with your company bought a single-family dwelling in the inner city of Hamilton.
Remind me about okay, hang on. So actually, I want to touch on the freehold town because not many investors do this strategy on this show. And freehold town is like one of my favorite simple strategies. Again, like for the person that has analysis paralysis, they want to do all these crazy things. It's kind of lost on people. Like there's nothing wrong with the simple turnkey, do nothing, younger property.
I liked the idea of doing that because it felt safe to me,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was only my second property. And even though I was learning and felt that I was, becoming a better and better landlord and more informed and knowing what I was doing, I was still looking for simple strategies, as you say. And yes, it's been a very good one.
Right. And that's the whole point. That's why we've recommended this to beginners. But they're like, oh, where's the cash flow? Like, you got to look at the whole picture. What's your vacancy rate been on this freehold town?
The original tenant is still the tenant.
Okay.
Yeah, So it's a trade-off, right? I mean,
Right.
technically, I could be getting much higher rent. If
Right.
they were to move out tomorrow and I were to rent it again, I could probably get much more. But I'm quite happy to have wonderful tenants and to have the rent sit where it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you did the inner city property. What's the
Mhm.
strategy on that one?
Well, again, not working with any kind of a joint venture partner, just working with myself
Mm-hmm.
and being able to get a mortgage for a certain amount of money. I kind of had to cut the cloth to fit. What's that saying? Cut the suit to fit the cloth. This was how much money I could access. What could I buy for that?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of neighborhood could I buy it in? And this neighborhood is near Ottawa Street, and which is
Oh,
one of the
fantastic.
up and coming neighborhoods in Hamilton, and very popular for everybody from couples to young families. They want to live near Ottawa Street, Barton Street, and it's worked out very well.
So to give the listener context, like this is we talked about Burlington Street earlier, which was the main, like the all eyes were on that neighborhood for the I don't know, for the investor that could see the potential, because that's West
Sure.
Harbor. And so all investors, you need to be able to do this with your cities, is you need to be able to identify where is the up and coming area. And now, almost impossible to cash flow now in West Harbor. And then shortly after was the areas around Ottawa Street. So for listeners' benefit, actually, do you want to tell folks about? You probably know better than I do. What is the history behind Ottawa Street?
Sure.
Ottawa Street North.
Absolutely. My mom and dad, when they first moved to Hamilton, they lived on the name of the street's escaping me, but it was quite close to Ottawa Street. And back in the 1950s and 60s, the downtown of Hamilton was the city of Hamilton, and Ottawa Street was one of the major shopping streets.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fabric center of Hamilton. If you're a sewer or a seamstress, you always went to Ottawa Street to buy your fabrics and your thread and your patterns and all of that. But now there's been such a renaissance, gentrification in Ottawa Street. You've got antique stores, you've got restaurants, you've got lots of different places that make it a great neighborhood to live in.
Mm-hmm. All the new restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
The rents are going up like crazy, though. That's the only sad
Yes,
part.
I know. It is one of the sad parts. Yes.
How quickly were you able to rent your property? Because my understanding is that's a pretty hot area for rent.
This was January of last year that we put it out for rent, and I'm going to say it took a couple of weeks. It was fairly quick. I think there was only one showing, and there were a handful of people who showed up, and one of those families seemed to be the best way to go.
Fabulous. And again, folks, you need to be able to identify those up and coming areas, because I would still identify that area is still probably one of the better or best up and coming areas where you can actually still cash flow. I'm just trying to think what are some of the things about it. Well, it's heavy in demand for both rent and for people that are trying to buy. That's one indicator.
Yep.
Major turnover in the terms of what stores. You would see. I don't know if it's still the textile district. And like, for example, I used to work on Queen Street and Queen Street West in Toronto. It's called the textile district. There are not that many textile stores left
anymore.
Yeah, it's all been replaced by like nice restaurants and
yes,
fashion stores and stuff like that. And Ottawa Street's not that different. There's been quite a lot of turnover. Actually, I remember a lot of the antique stores from Lock Street migrated to Ottawa Street, and a lot of them aren't there anymore either.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. So fabulous. And I'm guessing you're happy that you invested.
Of course.
With all the challenges that you run into. Actually, before I even get back to your book, tell me about this Mars thing.
Well,
this isn't an acronym, folks. This is the planet Mars.
It's the actual planet Mars, yes. I'm part of something that some people may know of and other people may have no idea what it's all about. It's called the Mars One mission. About 6 years ago, I was sitting on my couch one night looking at my computer watching CNN, and I saw this story, and it said something like, "Want to live on Mars? Apply now." So being a journalist myself, I read the story, and I'm quite an adventurous person, and I thought, wow, this sounds amazing. I want to be part of it. It's a Dutch entrepreneur. His name is Bas Lansdorp. He made his money in wind energy in the Netherlands, and it had always been his dream to take man to Mars. And he has a partner, a business partner, who does a lot of work for NASA, and they decided that they wanted to create a legitimate mission to colonize Mars. And you have to remember that they did this before anybody else was talking about doing it. Elon Musk wasn't talking about doing it. NASA was keeping their plans for Mars under wraps. And when he brought this out into the world, he asked people, "Who wants to join me? Who wants to be on a crew to go and colonize Mars?" And what the beauty of it is that he didn't want to hire actual astronauts the way Elon Musk is going to hire real astronauts, or NASA's using real astronauts. He wanted to hire the people on the street, actual real people who, for whatever reason, were a good fit for the mission. And if they decided that you were the right person to bring along for the ride, it didn't matter that you weren't an astronaut or an astrophysicist or a researcher or any of those things. So it was perfect for me because,
Right.
I'm a journalist.
Yeah, you can
I'm a
document
jack
the
of
whole
all
thing.
trade. Absolutely. Documented for everybody who's living on Earth. What an assignment, like the assignment of the century for a journalist to be given it's a one-way ticket to Mars, and to be told your job is to document this for everybody you leave behind on Earth. I felt like I died and gone to heaven. Do you want to come, Erwin?
No. You may not even make it.
It's a 7-month trip.
Is it only 7? I thought it was longer.
No, it's 7 months. And you know what? That doesn't sound like long to me, but everyone I tell that to, they think it's forever. To me, you're going a long way. Like 7 months isn't that much time to invest in getting to Mars.
Wait, how long was Chris? How long was Chris in the space station?
He was there, I believe it was a year, I think.
Okay.
And you know what? He was another inspiration for me. I'm also a teacher, and that man was a genius. He took his guitar into space. He played David Bowie songs to get young kids engaged to become curious about what space was all about.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity to do this much of what he did as a teacher, was very exciting to me too.
Mm-hmm. So how far along? Because I didn't follow this. I remember hearing about it. I didn't follow the story. Where did this end up?
The latest is that they've pushed out the launch date to 2032. Initially, it was I believe the first launch date was 2021, and now it's 2032. Which it's I think it's just so cool because they don't care that I'm going to be whatever age I'm going to be, 68 or 70 by the time their launch date comes around. They want to study the effects of space travel on all kinds of different ages of bodies. So it doesn't matter to them that some of us are older and some of us will be middle-aged and some of us might be a little bit younger. Yeah, 2032. So what happens then is the next round in astronaut selection is that they're going to put us all together in a simulated Martian colony. So they're going to build some kind of colony either in the desert to simulate, desert conditions, or in the Arctic or in northern Ontario or Iceland to simulate the cold.
Yeah.
And they're going to observe us to see how we get along. And what I love is it's not going to be the smartest people who get chosen, although of course there will be some very smart people who are chosen. It's going to be the people who know how to get along with other people. Mm-hmm. That's the key, because when you're in a spaceship, the first trip is going to be a crew of 4 people. They're going to send 4 people once every 2 years until eventually 24 people will be the number of people going. So until we're all up there, and then our job is to build the infrastructure and then invite younger people like you to come up and have families on Mars. So think it over, Erwin. You and Cherry might be interested.
This is all interesting. Literally out of the world. I don't even know.
So anyway, you asked where does it stand now? They are trying. Obviously, it costs a lot of money to do this sort of thing, and they're still looking for the right investors to be able to put the money into it that's required in order to go through this final round of the selection process. And once they find those people, not only they not only have to be wealthy, they have to be willing to see their money blow up in space
Yep, yep.
if that
You need
were
some
to happen.
billionaires. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what they're in the process of looking for right now. And once they find them and they um, bring us down from 100 to 24, they
Hmm.
divide us into groups of 4. We go into 10 years of training and learning everything from medicine to dentistry to a little bit of engineering to how to grow your own food in
Hmm.
that kind of atmosphere. You're going to have to be a jack of all trades,
Hmm.
and that's something that I really enjoy, so I'm looking forward to it.
Right. You're going to learn how to grow food out of poop.
Exactly, just
I'm,
like
I'm
Matt
referring to
Damon.
Martian, yeah. Great book, by the way.
Yes. And you know what, if Matt Damon was up on Mars, there would be a lot more people willing to go.
Oh, when you were describing that they want people to get along, I was thinking if they want a really good reality show, it has to be the opposite.
Exactly, but it's not going to be a reality show. It's going to be real life.
Reality shows are real life. They just feed
It's
people
not.
alcohol and then let the fireworks happen. No food, insert alcohol.
No. Okay, repeat after me, Erwin. This is not a reality show.
I'm
It's going to
sorry.
be my life.
I'm sorry I took the conversation this way. So I want to tie real estate into your book because I mentioned it in my talk in the conferences. This is one of those things that are people aren't planning for or making plans for. And I've told you this. A relative of mine is a social worker. Her job is to place seniors into senior care, into public senior care.
Mhm.
And her words were, "I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy."
And what does that tell you?
And so that's like, oh boy. Okay, so that's like, ding, 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 ding. I need to plan for this because I don't want my parents to go through it, let alone myself go through it. Right?
Exactly.
It's that bad. So you need to be financially prepared for something better than public senior care.
Exactly. And I think the issue is that most of us don't know what we don't know, and we don't learn it until we're in the middle of a crisis situation,
Hmm.
and by
Hmm.
then it's almost too late. If
Hmm.
you haven't done your homework in advance and you really aren't proactive and you don't feel prepared, you flounder, you struggle. I mean, my sister and I, we felt like we were drowning every day
Hmm.
just trying to keep our heads above water.
Hmm.
And your did you say it was your cousin, the social worker?
Yes.
They're quite correct. The trouble is that no one has taught us how the system works. And so if you don't understand it, it's just like real estate. If you don't
Hmm.
know how it works, how can you possibly navigate it
Hmm.
and be successful?
Hmm.
And what we're trying to do is to give people the survival guide that we never had,
Hmm.
to give them all of the tips, the practical, shortcuts, the resources, the links to specific documents on government websites that are
Hmm.
buried so deep under layers of red tape that no one in their right mind would ever be able to find them.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's what this is. And I agree with you. I think it's human nature to want to avoid thinking about it, but we really do need to start thinking about it
Hmm.
because, in my research, I discovered that according to StatsCan, right now there are more than 2.4 million people aged 65 and older living in Ontario. How many long-term care beds would you guess that there are in Ontario right now, if you had to guess?
You mean non-vacant?
Like public, yeah, no, just in general. How many long-term care beds in the public system in Ontario are there right now?
I have no idea. So hang on. What's the population of Ontario? It's like what? Close to 10? Around 10
Oh,
million?
I would say it's probably around 10. Yeah.
So you'd hope, yeah, you got to figure 10% of the population, 5% of the population,
Uh huh.
5%. So is there 500,000 beds?
There's 79,000 long-term care beds in
Oh,
Ontario right now, and
gee.
the government's promising another 15,000 in the next 5 years and another 15,000 in the 5 years after that. So that means that by the year 2030, there will be 109,000 long-term care beds in Ontario. But by
Hmm.
then, the population of people 65 and older has got to be close to 3 million. So it's not enough. But that's another conversation really, that we could talk forever about how the system isn't up to the task.
Hmm.
What we're trying to encourage people to do is to pay attention to the system we have and to learn about it, learn how it works, educate yourself, talk to other people about it, read this guide and actually feel that you will be prepared if and when that moment comes.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about the importance of investing in advance of this. What a lot of people don't realize is the expense involved
Mm-hmm.
in any kind of a private retirement residence, or a Seasons or an Amico or a place like that. These places are charging $5, $6, $7,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are able to go into them because they've sold the family home. But in some cases, the money runs out. You
Right.
outlive the money that your house has funded,
Right.
and you have to then either find an alternative or move into a publicly funded long-term care
Mm-hmm.
home,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very different way of life than
Right.
living in a private residence would be.
But what if grandpa has to go to the assisted care facility, but grandma still lives in the house? Can't sell
Exactly.
the house. Or
Precisely.
how are you going to afford this?
And it really opened my eyes to the necessity for people to understand this and to start preparing for it. I think nobody wants to confront their own mortality. They don't want to think about dying or about going into long-term care. But, once you're in the situation, you immediately start to regret the fact that you didn't take it more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look at how much time and effort people put into planning a vacation or planning a wedding, or planning some kind of a big event. Well, this is one of the biggest events of your life, is guiding yourself or your parents into their final days on the planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, it deserves your time and your energy, and it
Mm-hmm.
deserves that you do your homework.
Right, because it could be like your last 20 years on the planet,
Exactly.
and that would be very pricey.
You crunch the numbers. That's a lot of money.
That's what I brought the phone out for.
Yeah.
So let's work with 6,000.
Yep.
6,000 a month.
A month.
$72,000 a year. This is after tax money.
Amazing. Yes.
Say you just live 10 years. That's $720,000. What if you live beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, people are living. My mother was 98 when she passed away. 98. And that's become the norm. It's not so unusual. We are healthier. Yeah.
I should take up smoking when we're 65.
Well, that's one strategy. Yes. But, it's a real eye opener, isn't it? When you stop to consider.
I've known about this for a while, because my own grandparents, they went to Yihong, which is semi-private, I believe. And it was around $5,000 a month per grandparent. So like the whole family had to chip in.
And, probably didn't realize that it might be that much.
My dad's a doctor, so he would have known, but I'm not sure if everyone else knows.
Sure.
And I'm gonna sure that most people don't. And my cousin also, one of the stories she shared, not stories, but one of her what she shared about the system as well, is in her what she deals with. I'm paraphrasing, so I may not get this perfectly. I think you only have like 3 days notice. You have 3 days to accept and move in once a bed or spot becomes available, and you can't bring anything with you.
Basically, yeah, and decisions have to be made very quickly. I think that's one thing that people don't realize, if they haven't gone through the experience. You're offered a bed. Our experience was that we had 24 hours to either accept it or to turn it down. And if you accepted it, you had 5 days to actually move to the long-term care facility. But what one little thing that a lot of people, how could they know if no one tells them? If you refuse the bed for any reason, and there actually are reasons why you might be in a jam and you have to turn it down because something's come up and you really need something different, they take your name off the waiting list for 3 months, and you have to start all over again from the ground up. So that's huge. If, let's say, your mom or your dad, suddenly they can't walk, and for whatever reason you've had to turn down a bed, you got to pay a PSW to come in and help care for your parent for 3 whole months before they can even get on the list again,
Right.
and then wait to be offered a bed again, which could be maybe another month.
Right. If you can get a PSW.
If you can, yes. And that's that's the another reason why investing is important too.
Mm-hmm.
Even PSW care as a bridge to get you from, let's say, your mom or dad's house to long-term care, or their assisted living facility to long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a month that you're waiting to get in, and if they can't walk, they need trained help to help
Mm-hmm.
them, not just you.
Right.
And most PSWs, private ones, they'll charge anywhere from $20 to $30 an hour.
Right.
And if that's 8 hours or 10 hours a day, day after day,
Mm-hmm.
that's a significant amount of money too.
Right. If they'll take you on.
If they will, yes.
Because if someone needs assistance moving around, that's a tough job for anyone, right?
And
Versus
and
that
there's a
PSW can be my nanny and my kids weigh 50 pounds.
right. Yes. And there's a critical shortage of PSWs in
I'm not
Ontario right now.
surprised.
Critical, partly because of the poor pay and the unreliable hours, and also the physical nature of the work. It's very demanding work, and young people aren't interested in
Of
this
course
as a
not.
career.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
that makes all the baby boomers wonder to themselves, who's going to look after us?
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is why my parents always raised me to take care of myself.
Exactly.
Okay, so what does the other side look like? Say you can afford $5,000 to $10,000 a month.
Right.
Let's give folks. So let's get away from the scariness and let's get into what can it be. Say I'm 70 years old. What can 10 grand a month get me?
Well, I've been into some of these places, and they're beautiful.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you have too. You feel like you're living in a hotel.
Oh,
There's a concierge. There is, the lobby is looks like the most beautiful living room you've ever seen. Your suite is a self-contained little apartment that in some cases has a kitchenette. You can make your own food if you wanted to do that. There's room for you to have visitors. Some of them have a balcony
right.
with sliding doors.
Right.
I mean, they're beautiful places. They have wonderful facilities. The dining rooms, they have chefs who serve the finest food that you can imagine. They have beautiful rooms where you can sit down and watch movies with the other residents. There's activities, there's exercise, there's usually a pool. I mean, these places are beautiful.
Sounds like a vacation resort.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, your retirement could actually be a vacation.
That sounds wonderful.
It does.
And that's all dreary and stuff for the last half hour.
That's right. So that's motivation to want to invest and to build your wealth so that when the time comes that you could afford to live that way.
Right. And what would something like this cost if you want to be in the GTA?
Well, the places that I've seen are in the Hamilton area, and my understanding is that they're in the neighborhood of $6,000 a month.
Okay. Because that's the other thing is I noticed I've seen a lot of senior care homes, but some of them are almost like islands, like they're in the middle of nowhere, or they might be next to a small strip mall, like as in like the walkability is quite poor,
right?
As in it's like versus like there was one downtown Burlington. That's a wonderful location. You can walk to the lake, you can walk to the parks, lots of great shopping.
Sure.
So that's another factor that plays in as well.
Yes. And I think more and more of the developers are building these places in the cores of cities that do offer walkability to people who still have their mobility and want to be able to walk to the park or to the lake or to the grocery store if they want to.
And just like rents and house prices are going up, I wouldn't be surprised if these prices go up.
Okay, imagine we're talking in 2020 right now, and let's say it's $6,000 a month.
Yeah.
In 10 years, how much do you think it might be?
If I was running it, I'd charge a lot.
I can see that. But I mean, at least 7, 8. I mean, it's got to increase that much, maybe more.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh boy.
And I don't want to scare people, but I do want people to understand like there's so many important reasons to invest and to make money. I spend a lot of time like thinking about like the philosophy of money, why people think about money, and all these sayings like money can't buy happiness and stuff. But if you're not financially secure, I don't know how happy you are. Versus someone who is financially secure, or financially independent, or financially free. Right.
Yep. And this is a great example of that. I think money can buy you comfort. It can buy you security.
Yeah.
It can buy you a feeling of just contentedness.
Yeah.
That, if you don't have it and you can't afford that kind of accommodation, yeah, life isn't quite as nice as it could be.
Right. So we've talked a lot about hacking on this show and everything else that we do. What's the retirement home hack you think then?
Sure. You mean just in terms of how to navigate the system?
Uh, what are like three key points for someone who's planning for their parents or planning for themselves?
Sure. Sure. Number
What are
one,
like the top three things that you want to know before getting into this process?
absolutely. Number one piece of advice is to, if you do buy our book, and we're very good about, and it's not a shameless plug, but it's just a fact. We're very good about we're showing you where to find things online. How do you
Mm-hmm.
find this? So there's a way to find a list of all of the long-term care facilities in your LIN. A LIN is short for Local Health Integration Network, and there are
Mm-hmm.
14 of those in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And as you may know, they're going to dismantle the LINs and create one super agency called Ontario Health. So we don't really know how that's going to impact things yet. But right now, the expectation of the LINs is that you tour the places that are in your area so that you can see them up close and personal, and compile a list of your preferred facilities that you could hand to your care coordinator at any time
Mm-hmm.
and say, these are the places that my mom or my dad would be happy living in.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do that. We did everything wrong. My
Mm-hmm.
sister and I were kind of like two deer in the headlights. We were so exhausted. We were so overwhelmed. We were so frustrated. We felt we didn't have the energy or the time to go touring these places. So we made our decision based on what we could see of them online, and also based on the opinion of someone we know who works in healthcare, who had at least seen these places and could give
Mm-hmm.
us some idea of what they were like on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
This is totally the wrong approach. You really need to tour these places, and you need to start doing it now. Don't put it off. Start doing your homework today,
Right.
because it's easy to say, oh, I'll do it next week or I'll do it next month. Well, next week never comes. You
Mm-hmm.
always find something to fill the void.
Mm-hmm.
That's our number one piece of advice. Start touring places now and put together a list of the places that you would be happy for your mother or your father to live in. Most
Mm-hmm.
important thing. Number two, it sounds like such an easy thing. Go to the dollar store and buy a spiral bound notebook and write everything down. Write down every conversation you have with every healthcare provider, every conversation you have with your LIN care coordinator, every conversation with every bureaucrat you talk to on the phone from the Ministry of Long-Term Care. Write it down, document it. You will be amazed at how unreliable your memory can be, even at the best of times. And to write it down, you have a resource that you can go back to time and time again. You have the facts in front of you instead of trying to remember, what was that conversation. So certainly write it down. Number three, I would say one of our top tips is to take care of yourself. There's this phrase that's being thrown around these days, self-care, and it's such an important thing. It's so easy to get run down and have this feeling of being an overwhelm all the time. You must look after yourself and your own mental health. Some of your listeners who are as old as I am remember a guy named Red Green. He used to say, "Keep your stick on the ice," and truer words were never spoken when it comes to trying to guide your parents into the final days of their life. You need to look after yourself and your own mental health. Hang on to your sense of humor. Laugh. Keep your parents laughing. It's so good for your mental health to do that. Something else that I could suggest too is that at the end of every day, have somebody you can go to kind of just debrief and let go of all the stresses of the day. Get it out. Tell them what happened and what was frustrating and what went well and what didn't, and then just let it go. And then when the next day comes, you're starting from ground zero, and you're hoping that the day can unfold in the best possible way without any baggage from the day before.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care is really, really important. So I can't emphasize that enough.
I'm just wondering if one hack. So, like for example, when you give the idea of the your realtor's suggested hack of asking the hairstylist for market rents, my hack is I often ask a property manager what the rents are. I'm just thinking, could I just ask my family doctor which are the good properties for?
You mean the good facilities?
Yeah, the good facilities.
Well, your family doctor will look you in the eye and tell you that that's not their job.
Okay,
And
okay.
that if they were to give you advice and it didn't work out very well, they
Right,
don't
right.
want you to come back and be upset with
Got
them
it.
or threaten to sue them or anything of that nature.
Got it. Got it. I was thinking more. I would ask a friend who's a family doctor in that area.
You know what? One thing that I would recommend is that you talk to your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to friends who are also working on getting their mother, their father into a home in your area.
Mm-hmm.
Compare notes with people. When you go on your tours, take photographs. Talk to the people who run the place and take notes so that you can consult with your friends and
Mm-hmm.
offer them the benefit of your research so
Mm-hmm.
that it might help them and maybe they can help you too.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in this together. One of the messages, the key messages that we try to get out as well is that you're not alone. So many times my sister and I, we felt alone. We felt like there was no one really there to guide us.
Mm-hmm.
No one gave us a colorful brochure to explain how things worked. And all these months later, we can look back and we realize that it's important for us to let other people know that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
We've been where you are, and we know what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And we wrote this book for you.
Mm-hmm. Not as serious as your situation, but this reminds me a lot about the first time we had non-payment of rent from a tenant and had to go to tribunal.
Wow, that's a big day.
It is, but it's not. What's at risk is nothing like yours.
But I like the analogy. Yes, it's equally daunting.
Yeah, I think I wanted to try to relate it to what our listeners would be familiar with.
Absolutely, yes.
Is there like a top 2 or 3 of yours for a facility that you would choose for yourself?
I think it's really important to feel the energy of the place when you go inside it. Does it feel like the kind of place where you'd be comfortable? And
Mm-hmm.
you can feel that energy. You know pretty much when you step in the door whether the people who work there are
Mm-hmm.
there because they genuinely want to help everybody
Mm-hmm.
or if they're there just because it's a business. And to be honest with you, I think most of the people who work in long-term care, they see it as a vocation. They're there because they truly want to help people and they
Mm-hmm.
want to help look after your parents.
Mm-hmm.
But you can feel that, and I think that's important. What does the place feel like?
Mm-hmm.
And then what kinds of amenities are there? What kinds of activities are there? Are they doing their best to try and make sure that your parents still feel alive and vibrant, no matter how long they have left to live here on Earth? That's important too.
This is all interesting, and I hope the listener's not is still engaged and still listening to this.
Well, we have talked about a variety of different topics, that's for sure.
Uh-huh.
But I think they all mesh in some interesting way.
Right. I don't know how to say this. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I have certain targets for what I want for my net worth. Like I'm just trying to think like what do you need to retire with to be able to afford a nice facility?
Wow,
Obviously more than
I guess.
720,000.
Well, yeah. I mean, it all comes down to how long you think you're going to live. If you're going to project your numbers to cover you until you live to be 100,
Right.
that's a pretty big number.
Right. Because assumed $720,000 per year, but like for my age, it's going to be much higher than that. Let's call it $1 million. Let's just be safe and call it $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so you probably need to retire after tax minimum 20 million. Minimum. To be safe, it should be 3.
To be safe, yes. And also to realize there's a distinction between living in a private retirement home that where the costs are what they are, and living in long-term care. Because even in a fancier retirement home, if you really need long-term care, it's pretty tough for you to stay there. If you need round-the-clock nursing and round-the-clock PSW care, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people who really do need to go into long-term care and leave their retirement home behind them. And once we're in public long-term care, the costs aren't nearly what they are in a retirement home. Just as an aside, I mean, a private room in publicly funded long-term care is around, I think it's around $2,600 a month.
to have money is good.
Yes, you are correct.
This is wild. All right. Karen, can you share again the name of the book?
Sure. It's called The Indispensable Survival Guide to Ontario's Long-Term Care System, and the paperback version is available on chapters.indigo.ca and amazon.ca, and the digital version is available on Kindle, Kobo, and Smashwords.
Are you going to do an Audible book?
Yeah,
It's awesome because you have the
I
voice for
am.
it.
Yes, I am. It's funny that you ask. It's the next thing on the list.
How long does that take?
It takes longer than people think.
Of course, just like editing. Like editing is supposed to. It's
Exactly.
like what's editing, like 1-to-1,
Um,
1-to-1 ratio.
you mean writing? Like
Yeah,
actual
whatever it took you
writing?
to
Oh,
write.
at least. Oh, at least. I mean, you rewrite as much as you write.
And then how long for the audio?
Oh, they have the studio has a ratio of hours because they have to clean it up as they go along too, and that takes them time. I don't know. It's something like, oh, probably 3 hours for every 20 minutes of spoken word,
Whoa,
maybe longer.
whoa. And then how much is an hour of studio time?
It depends on where you go. They vary. It's not as much as you might think it is.
You can't just do like we're doing now.
You'd like to think that, but they actually have standards, audio standards, and they have to be a little bit better than this.
This is okay. Fair enough. All right, Karen. Any final words you want to share?
I just want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to, first of all, to talk with you, because it's so much fun to talk with you. You are one of the people that I can look back in my journey of learning about real estate that I remember as being, a seminal person. I met you and then I started looking at things differently, which is wonderful. So it's great to talk to you and to tell everybody more about my real estate journey and how you played into it. But I also really appreciate the chance to be able to talk to people about not only going to Mars, but also trying to help people here on Earth with this book and telling them where that they can get it.
Help people here on this earth. Karen, can you share your website? And you have a personal website as well.
Yes, the book has a website that is indispensableguide.ca. And if you want to drop us a line, you can get us at indispensableguide@gmail.com. And my own website, which I designed to promote mindful living, meditation, and self-care, is karencumming.com. And you can also contact me there.
Fantastic. Oh, I have a question. Sorry, we're slightly over time. Are you okay for time?
Of course.
I have a quick question. Have you looked at doing any sort of real estate investing related to the older population?
It fascinates me because I can see the need for it,
Right.
the communal living, like bringing
Yeah.
a group of seniors together under the same
Right.
roof. It really does fascinate me. It's nothing that I've really thrown myself into just yet, but I am eager to learn as much as I can about it. And if there's a potential to move into something like that, I think it would be great.
Right, because you've heard Anna Moore speak. She was on
Yes,
my podcast. She spoke briefly at one of our meetings.
that's right.
It's actually interesting because of this podcast, one of our clients, Jody Fleck, connected with her,
Mhm.
and he's been keeping updated on what he's trying to accomplish in Welland around
Right.
what we're talking about here, more like communal
Really?
living. But what's
Yes.
stopping us from being able to execute communal living for rentals is the zoning. You're not
Really?
well, yeah, because we in a home in Hamilton, for example, you cannot have more than 3 unrelated parties in a property.
Right.
Right? So, like, Golden Girls would not be allowed
Right. Yes.
in our property. Um, but
and the issue is similar in Niagara.
it's pretty much similar in every city. They all have
Right.
limitations on how many people who are unrelated are
Mhm.
allowed in one property.
But don't you think it's kind of like secondary suites? I mean, the time is going to come where they realize that they have to change the way they do things.
I think we're way behind. There's way too many people that are on wait lists for apartments for anything.
Mhm.
Like Anna Moore alluded to it, for example, and even in our own market, I don't even know if you can get a 1-bedroom apartment, and I'm pretty sure it's probably around at least $1,200 now these days,
I would think so, at
right?
least.
Versus you can get a bedroom, like for example, we rent bedrooms to students for $500 to $600 to $700.
Mhm.
and that's all inclusive.
Right.
Often that's inclusive.
Sure.
Uh, that's a big savings.
Huge
And I'm sure
savings
there's
over
many
time.
people who would prefer to rent to adults over students.
I think there would be far fewer worries involved.
Right,
Yes.
right. Far
Hmm.
fewer worries. I think the communities will be much more open to it as well.
Yes.
And it's a public service that has to happen,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I agree with you completely, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the uh, the thinking changes. You know,
Hmm.
from a city point of view, from a government point of view.
Yeah, it's all
Good to have
slow.
money, Erwin.
It's almost yes, it's good to have money so that no one that we care about would have to be in this situation, that they
Yes.
live in in these sorts of situations. And
Yep.
yeah, it's good. It's more important than ever to have money.
Yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah. Okay, Karen, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Erwin. And if you change your mind and decide you want to come with me to Mars, you let me know, okay?
What is the life expectation? What is the expected life?
You mean life expectancy once you get there?
Yeah.
You know what? I don't even know. I mean, that's going to be part of the experimentation that we do, is to
Hmm.
figure out how much longer would a human being be able to live up there.
Hmm.
That's I kind of see the end of my life is going to be a public service to humanity. They're going to be able to experiment on me and all the other people who go to
Right.
try and get some answers to questions like that. It's a great
Right.
question,
They have a third of Earth's gravity.
and
Um,
it's really cold.
of course, it's so far from the sun.
Exactly.
Like, look how much the difference in temperature is just because we're slightly further from the sun because of our seasons.
Exactly. I'm taking my Canada Goose jacket with me, or I'm buying one to take with me.
This is all fascinating.
Mm.
All right. Again, thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Erwin. Thanks so much.